The future of work. I remember talking about this, started talking about this, writing about this in around 2012. Was that 13 years ago? We used to have a saying, it was all about technology as well. It was a different type of technology. It was about automation. It was about the world being much more global, us being interconnected. We used to talk about those millennials that were new into the workplace now. And now it's about Gen Z, and it's about how we use this brilliant technology that's going to improve all of our businesses and improve our lives. But it has some risks associated with it. But whether it was 2013, whether it's today, or whether it's 1993, when William Gibson, the writer, first came up with a quote, the future's already here, it's not just evenly distributed. And that's the most important thing. Whatever chair you're sitting in today, whether you're a business leader, whether you're advising business leaders on their strategy or their communications or their talent plans, whether you're a parent, this is really important for us to remember. We can't predict the future. We can absolutely plan for it, and we can run scenario plans, and whether you're the biggest tech firm in the world, you've got to run a scenario plan because you've got to think about where is that compute power coming from. And how do I finance that? And that's why you've seen in the last couple of weeks, all the big tech firms are figuring out where they finance their chips from and coming up with very interesting circular deals. So whatever company you are, you've got a plan for the future. What you've also got to understand is you have to lean into AI to drive the massive returns on the capital investment that every firm has done. Even the tech firms who used to be capital light and now are capital intensive, given the focus on the need for infrastructure and chips and building up data centers. So you've got to lean into it because you've got to deliver that return on investment. But the third key message I want you to kind of think about as we go through the course of the panels and you think about this over cocktails and take it into your weekend and next week is, whilst we've got a plan for the future, whilst we've got to deliver the returns on all of our investments, there's a real risk of an AI divide. So what do I mean by that? The haves and the have-nots, we see it in our society through income inequality. We saw it even through digitalization that we've all experienced in the last 10 to 15 years in corporations, where certain people got digital skills because they were in digital roles, and some people got left behind. We are seeing that, and there's a risk of that with AI, because if you're in a role that's exposed to AI, and you've got a firm that invests in your training, and you've got a culture that lets you experiment, you're good. You're good now, and you're good in the future. If you're in essential retail, if you're in a labor-intensive industry which is not using it, if you're in an institution which has a risk-averse nature to using it, or if you're in a country where the government's trying to protect jobs and doesn't want you to innovate, say in the public sector, you risk getting left behind. So these are really important messages as we think about this. So, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that we can't control, but you can plan for it. There's a lot of macroeconomic uncertainty. Everywhere we look, there's polarization in society. We got to understand that there's a set of forces that are influencing everyone's business strategy. These are illustrative and some of the things that we see from our clients. The uncertainty has to be managed by looking at different scenarios. We saw that through the pandemic. We see that now in spades. There's a trust gap in the world. There's a trust gap in workplaces. Whether we like it or not, if you look at the trust survey from Edelman, which I think it's been going for 25 years, they show that even though business is more trusted than government, the trust gap within business and between leaders and employees in businesses is dwindling. And all of these slides are in the public domain, and we'll share them afterwards, so feel free to click them and put them on LinkedIn, etc. But all of this will be available. Every piece of data here is in the public domain. But we've got to address polarization and the trust gap. Why do we have to address polarization in workplaces? Because people care about issues, even if your company is taking a stance or not taking a stance on any issue. People care about wars that are happening that impact them personally. People care about reproductive rights in this country. People care about LGBT rights. And people don't feel, are not going to be able to give all of their discretionary effort, and it's going to impact their experience if they're not given a space to at least for people to understand that. And so we're not talking about debates, we're not talking about you changing my point of view, just talking about listening, like Giselle said. So this polarization trust gap's a big deal. The returns on investment on AI, we've already talked about that. This is the year of 2026, and my colleague Rima will talk more about this in her panel. 2026 is the year we've all got to get returns on those investments. That's what the markets want, that's what your CFOs want, that's what everyone needs to have, because we've been investing a ton into AI, and we haven't seen the true returns as we would like to. Yes, we've seen them at the margins in some of the obvious use cases, but that's the big way that work has to be reimagined with AI, with data, etc. The other thing in organizations is people want clarity. People want clarity on simple stuff like, what is your return to work policy? 5 years into the pandemic, post-pandemic, we're still talking about return to office. So whether it's that, whether it's how do decisions get made in my organization, because now you've empowered me with AI, but how do I get to make decisions? And speed. The American worker right now is exhausted. And I'd say it's workers are in many organizations. But all we're asking with AI, and we do this as well in our firm, everything has to be faster. You can't have meetings with 20 people, you can't have 3-hour meetings. We need decisions faster, we need use cases put into production faster, we need a bunch of change, we need the regulator requirements met faster. So there's a lot of piece around like clarity and speed. But what's not going away is the need for human skills within all of that. To use the AI in the right way, you need critical thinking. You also need to understand business and process thinking, and those skills won't go out of fashion. But you're going to have to understand the fusion of how tech works and how we think about inputs and outputs, and what's actually behind the algorithm or the LLM and what's in that training data. So there's some of the perspectives that we want to share. I'm not going to get through every slide now, we'll try and get us back on time. What does this mean for workplaces? And I've written a blog on this, you can read it and you don't have to agree with it, and we'd love a discussion over cocktails as well. From my perspective, there's 3 big challenges organizations are facing right now in workplaces. First is the them and us. Wherever we look, whatever survey, leadership has one view on how the company is being run, how the AI program is being run, how the return to office program is run, how effective leadership is at managing in the world of agents and workers. And the workforce has a different view. We see the culture wars between Gen Z and leadership. There's this great survey that Susie Welsh has done out of NYU Stern, which basically says there's only 2% value alignment. She wrote this in the journal last week. There's only 2% value alignment between Gen Z and what workers, what leaders want in organizations. So said differently, kids coming out of college today, their values don't align with what corporations are looking at. So we have a culture war in terms of generations. So wherever we see it, there's challenges. The second one brings us back to AI. Every firm out there is looking for their productivity or their return on investments. But to use this brilliant technology, you need time, you need to experiment, you need to build use cases, you need to think about new revenue models, you need to think about different drug discovery. You need to bring different people from inside and outside of your firm together. So we've got this tension between, we want the productivity and the returns, but to really use the beautiful technology and reimagine work and reimagine revenue streams, etc., you need the creativity and you need time and you need the culture. The other big challenge in organizations is we've got low attrition. This is not the great resignation anymore. We've got low voluntary attrition. People aren't leaving. In my own firm, it's in the low teens, whereas normally it would be higher than that. In many of my clients, it's in single digits. And we're not seeing massive layoffs. Yes, you've seen a few with AI through the tech firms and some of the banks, but this is not the '08 crisis. We have not seen massive layoffs. Yet, job openings are down, and people aren't leaving. So we have low attrition, and we have low engagement. The Gallup survey, which again is the poster child for some of the engagement surveys, we've been doing this stuff for years. In this year's survey, Only 32% of the American workforce is engaged at work. So people aren't leaving and they're not loving their work. And like any relationship, that's not good. That's not healthy. So you've got the worker psyche that I'm tired, I'm burnt out, you're throwing all this AI at me, I'm resting in place and I'm not going to give my discretionary effort to invest in a company that I don't know is going to rip me at one point in the future. And you're asking me to do this stuff really quickly. And you've got the business leaders saying to the street, to their stakeholders, to their constituents, we're reinvesting, we're putting all this money into AI, we're driving the returns, we're going to deliver on the short-term results and the long-term. So these are the challenges. So I'm going to speed up. What scares me about the future of work? Activism. Activism is a good thing. It's good to give people a voice in organizations. Yet, one of the scariest stats I saw from the Edelman Trust Barometer last January that got presented in Davos, that I still don't think people are waking up and looking at, is 40% of people polled, 33,000 people polled across all demographics, all countries, a very diverse sample. 40% basically said, we will participate in hostile activism, which means we'll damage property, we'll damage reputations, we'll engage in violence, even death, and we'll feel justified if it furthers our social cause. That's scary. Why is it scary? Because these people live in our workplaces. And you say they don't, but we all know someone who's going to take something too far. And we've all seen terrible situations in New York with the CEO of a healthcare organization shot, active shooters, people feeling very justified in this. This is scary in workplaces and this is scary in society. This happens when we have rising income inequality, when we have an AI divide, when we have them and us. And so all these things are connected to some point. So let's talk about AI. There's a ton of investments going into AI. ChatGPT's got 800 million users, etc. It's consumer grade technology that's coming to all of our corporations in some shape or form. The AI divide is real because when we did some analysis through the AI jobs barometer, we actually saw that those firms that invested in AI and have a lot of roles exposed to AI, they were driving 3x revenue per employee compared to others. Also, people who actually have AI in their job title were actually getting a wage premium of 56% wage premium. So that's great for the haves. What about the have-nots? Stuff we have to think about the AI divide. This is a really interesting report that came out of OpenAI, and my colleague Rima was sitting with OpenAI in a closed-door meeting, and she'll probably share some of that over cocktails. This is an interesting report to read. I spend a lot of time in financial services. Only 6% of financial institutions are using ChatGPT, whether it's the enterprise version or the personal version. I will tell you that's understated. So why am I bringing this up? There's a survey out there that says if you're downloading it using your work email, it counts. How many of our clients, how many of our colleagues in financial services are using their personal email on their personal phone to check it? And you could say that's fine, they're just getting ideas, etc. These are regulated industries. It creates risk. It creates potentially consumer harm, etc. It's a simple figure when you think about usage. The left-hand side's really interesting as well when you think about how many users, 43% of people are using it at work. So whilst ChatGPT, and I just, you can look at the other LLMs as well, while it's got great usage, there's opportunities, and it makes a lot of our, us more efficient in, generating information, building our marketing campaigns, etc., writing reports. There's a risk as well when you think about it in organizations. For those in banking, this came out yesterday as well. Evident AI, there's a firm that puts together analysis of all the different banks and what they're doing on AI. JP Morgan's number one, etc. The headline you want to take away from these charts is there's an arms race for AI talent. Whether you're a software engineer, whether you're focusing on the responsible AI elements, etc., the banks have grown their talent 25% compared to last year. The dirty little secret is the banks have shrunk overall headcount. So whilst they've grown AI talent, and one day we'll all be called AI talent, and we won't even talk about AI talent, but that day's not today. They've cut overall heads because they've got to fund it somehow. And so that's, while this is great, it's again the risk of the haves and the have-nots. And there's a stat here at the bottom that talks about, and this is all public information, Tab 1 has got the highest percentage of AI talent as a percentage of overall headcount. They're really an AI firm, or the biggest AI firm, etc. And some of you work at some of these organizations. So whilst this is great, we've got to make sure that we are investing in all talent and not just AI talent. And again, AI talent commands higher wages. You've got to fund those somehow. So let's talk about AI, a couple of headlines, and then I'll promise to leave you alone. Reimagine the work. That is the number one discussion we're having now when we're delivering AI programs. What does that mean? It means all the stuff that some of us did back in the day on process reengineering, and may have read Michael Hammer's book in the 90s, and all of the Six Sigma stuff, and all of the stuff that we say, you start with outcomes, you look at the process, you don't just automate, you obliterate, you fix the data, you look at the roles and responsibilities. All of that is back in vogue because many of these firms have implemented AI and implemented use cases here. They haven't actually taken a full end-to-end journey, an outcomes-back view to say, how do we re-engineer the whole thing? How do we reimagine the work, redesign the work? That's the opportunity to drive ROI, but this is hard because it means process, data, people, agentic AI, machine learning, etc. Not just agentic AI, or not just Gen AI, or not just some machine learning. That's where the value is. As you think about agentic AI, the big buzzword that kind of came out in the first quarter, think about it as a way to look at the repetitive tasks that you can put business rules against. Think about a chatbot that you're creating. Think about a recruiter that's automatically calling someone who's scheduling something. In every one of our jobs, we have tasks that you can put business rules against. And there's other tasks you can't, your interactions, your meetings, you're building trust with clients or colleagues. And that's a way that you can kind of bifurcate this. And that's really what this chart is showing. So think about this. Massive opportunities with agentic to take out tasks and redefine jobs. The skills around creativity and building relationships are still going to be there. This, by the way, was the same when we implemented other automation techniques. It's all at the task level. But that's the big opportunity, and we work with our clients now where every single function, every single set of processes has maps where we say this could be done by agents, this could be done by autonomous agents, human-in-the-loop agents, this could be automated, this is something you've got to do with data cleanup, etc. Finally, this is about leadership. So from my perspective, firms want to grow. GDP is challenged around the world. GDP is challenged in the US. We could debate the reasons why. Inclusive growth is all about growing, but making sure that you're lifting all boats. Meaning that we don't have the haves and the have-nots and rising inequality. Meaning that it's not all about the Mag 7 in terms of the stock. It's actually not all about the stock prices, because you've got private capital and not everyone invests in the stock price. But thinking about inclusive growth, and from my perspective, tomorrow's leaders need to absolutely be AI fluent in every single aspect of it. They've got to understand it, they've got to be curious, etc., and creative. But what they've also got to do is they've got to be advocates. They've got to speak truth to power. They've got to inform people in their organization. They've got to talk about policy issues. Whether it's the issues of the H-1Bs here in the US, whether it's about other policy issues on immigration, the challenge we have right now is we have some leaders being great on storytelling and their public persona, and some doing AI, etc. We need more courageous leaders. Love you to think about that. Skills of the future, you've seen that, etc. Final point. When you come back to AI and the future of work, you need a framework. This is a framework that we think about here at PwC. We think about redesigning the work end to end, reimagining it. We think about what is that doing for the individual worker, in terms of what's their skills, motivations, incentives, how you're taking care of them, and if you have to transition them out, how you do that in a humane way. And then we think about the workforce. We think about what's the pyramid going to be? What's the processes to incent? What's our job framework look like? And again, it's a simple framework. Others are available as well. So the final point is to bring this back to where we started. 3 key messages. We've got to plan for the future. We've got to invest in scenario planning. We've got to lean into AI because it's going to deliver the ROI, but only sustainable if we manage the AI divide. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to the session, and I'm really sorry I didn't get us back on time.